Welcome, Abhishek, to the D2C podcast by GoKwik. Super excited to have you on the podcast. Of course, you are a great D2C insider, I should say. You run a community by that name. And of course, everyone knows you as a D2C insider also. Just because, you have been there, you know the space, you run a brand for yourself. So I am personally super excited. Was waiting for this, to happen for many weeks. Thank you so much.
No, absolutely. Yeah. Thanks a lot. My pleasure, and always great to speak to you, Chirag. And yeah, I think we had to reschedule a couple of times, but I think finally it's happening. I was also looking forward to it. So yeah, good stuff with GoKwik. Yeah, I think we have been a very early pilot with you, and like really impressive. The way the product has shaped, and really excited about the new features coming in. And yeah, I think this is a great initiative to bring out stories from the industry, and would love to partner from the community side also going ahead.
Sure. We'll do that. Interesting. So let me start with, you have been in the space. How have you seen this evolve? I know I have been on the other side previously with Bombay Shaving Company, so probably was in the same boat. But would love to hear from you. I think you have previously ran an affiliate business, then a performance marketing business. So you understand, how businesses are run and what is this. And I would go back to last year where everyone used to say this is a tech business, to you deeply understanding this is a brand business.
True.
It'll be great for everyone to know that how have you seen the journey? How do you look at D2C as a business?
True. So actually, more than, the affiliate and the performance business, which is what I obviously started my career with Tyru, but I think I actually mirrored D2C a lot with e-commerce journey, right? So like if you observe like 2008 when Flipkart started, and then the whole e-commerce boom happened. Earlier there was just Rediff and India Times, right? And then Flipkart came in, and then 2010 se leke 2020 has been an evolution for e-commerce in India, right? And then eventually Amazon came in, and you saw a lot of players coming in, low differentiation, most of them dying off, heavy consolidation happening. But what has happened in that whole phase is the consumer evolution, right? From that 2008 era when people did not have credit cards and people were skeptical about shopping online, to this era where everything is online. And obviously the peak of that has been Corona, right? So COVID actually, was like a huge accelerator to that. So already there was a foundation being built, and then COVID came and it just, took it off, right? So D2C is actually, a playbook which is basically opened up because e-commerce infrastructure has been created, right? And then there is a market gap in terms of the brands not really, coming up with a niche product or servicing a lot of consumer gaps. And I think it's a good marriage of both, right? And that's why D2C is, sometimes perceived to be a tech business because somewhere it is e-commerce, right? But eventually, as we all now know, it is not a tech business. It's a brand business. It's a consumer business. It's a physical product business. So I think it's still in the early days. I think last 5 years for D2C has been like really amazing. Like when we started the community in 2018, D2C did not exist. And we could not imagine that, at that time, Boat or Mama could suddenly become so big, right? So I think it's been a great ride in the last 4-5 years, but I still feel that it's still like the start of the journey. And I think a lot of skeptics are there because a lot of people jump into the ring when they see an opportunity. But I think when you separate them from the actual people who are actually having a vision or trying to leverage the opportunity, I think there's a long-term opportunity here. And I think it's fundamentally a very strong way to build a brand, right? Like the best way to build a brand today is D2C, because from a launchpad, from a go-to-market perspective, this is the best way to reach a niche segment, test the product market fit, get the consumer, right. And then obviously you go omni-channel, you go offline, you go international, whatever, right? So I think right now every brand is going offline. Last year, every brand was going online, right? So I think these things will happen in the short run, but I think in the long run, my faith in D2C is very strong. I feel this is like a very strong channel, and I think for end consumers it's a great thing because consumers have been wanting this innovation from a long time, right? So it's all coming from there. I feel that like in innerwear as a category there has been so much of gaps, and no one has really innovated, and the consumer has been buying the same product for the last 20-30 years, right? And there's no need, there's no reason. Consumer is willing to spend, he is willing to experiment, but there's no supply, right? So I think D2C is really a clutter breaker or a cookie breaker in that sense. It just opens the door to like Shopify says, arming the rebels, right? So it just arms the rebels. And I think companies like Shopify, GoKwik, and all of you enablers, I think you guys are making it so easy for entrepreneurs to like really come up with their ideas and execute it and go to market. So I think it's a very beautiful thing. And if I mirror it with e-commerce trajectory, I think it's exactly the same. With T2C today, you see suddenly so many brands coming in, right? Most of them will not survive because the product market fit is not there, or the consumer experience is not there, or the gap is not large enough, right? But eventually you will see very large outcomes and large brands being built, and not just Indian brands, but I would say that we would see global brands being built from India, right? And that is something which again was not possible maybe few years back, right? So yeah, very exciting. And I think once the headwinds settle down, and once the real businesses emerge, I think it's a very strong ecosystem being developed, which actually, if you think 10 years back, you could not have imagined this happening, right? So yeah, I think it's a great evolution for the ecosystem overall.
Totally. I think I will echo your thoughts in terms of, we being in 2000, you started the community in 2018. I was in 2019 at Bombay Shaving Company.
Right.
And I used to have these tussles with our board and Shantanu that, okay, this is going to be a strategic channel. This is where the growth will happen, etc., etc. And where, today we are at a stage where, it's no more a question these days. Now everyone is on this side. I clearly remember, and you would also remember 2018-19, you would say, yaar, ye nahi chalega. China mein nahi hua hai, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
And now at least I have seen the narrative change to a very next level, wherein India has worked and people are saying Southeast Asia will work, Middle East will work in the similar phase. They are brand-starved countries. In fact, you'll be surprised. So India is $60 billion e-commerce. Southeast Asia is 120, another 120, which is 60 Indonesia and 60 rest of Southeast Asia.
Oh, wow. Oh,
so India is bigger than 50 million people.
You're saying it's bigger than India?
Southeast Asia. Yes, yes. So Southeast Asia plus India is three-way split. 60, 60, 60, 60 Indonesia, 60 India, 60 rest of Southeast Asia.
Okay, interesting.
So it's become very interesting. And to your point that I am able to see that some of these brands are going to go international.
Definitely.
And are going to go international the D2C way only.
Absolutely.
We already see Mamaearth, Mamaearth being there in Sugar there in Middle East.
Yeah.
Demons has launched in Middle East. So you will see that some of that starting to happen.
Middle East is actually a good mirror to India because it's the same consumer, same habits, and obviously price point wise, Middle East is a much better market to be in, and I think sizing and all also is very similar. And again, 70% COD and all of that, right? So it's very similar behavior. And I think their brands are really they have all the global brands. So I think there, if you are able to compete and build a brand, I think it's a huge. Then by default you're global, right? Because you're competing with global brands.
It's a very brand-starved place, and of course, so in total, we have in the last 3-4 years, we've traveled a huge journey in terms of not being the belief to having a very strong belief. And you are right that 2021 was an aberration, where from a startup funding point of view was that okay, everything is going to become a unicorn.
Yeah.
So at least some sanity prevailing in, and now I'm sure that you would have also saw that DSG Partners post.
Right.
That we back consumer brands, not
right. Right.
So that has also changed.
No, absolutely.
And that is right also.
No, true. I think brand playbook is very different from tech playbook, and the expectation need to be very different. The outcomes also will be different. As an entrepreneur, also I would say 100 million outcome versus a billion outcome versus 100 billion outcome. Not every business model is aligned to a certain outcome, right? So you can't put together 9 mothers and have a baby in a month, right? So it's the same thing, right? So, but yeah, it's a beautiful business. If you enjoy it, it's a long-term business. It's a fundamentally sound business, right? It's not a high burn business, right? So that way, I think it has its upside, it has its downside also. It's a safe business to be in that way. I mean, you can't do much wrong, unless you get the product wrong or the consumer wrong. That's like fatal for you. But otherwise, I think you can't really do much wrong in this business, right? Which tech product business, you can burn off billions of dollars without realizing where before finding a product market fit, right?
Yeah. So it's hard, a lot of people ask me that how do you judge product market fit? I'm sure people would ask you also. And in CPG businesses, at least there is some sense of that. Okay, this is how the evolved business P&L will look like. In tech businesses, it's still, everything is upfront in terms of cost, and then you are okay thinking that I'm going to monetize 5 years later. So it becomes a tricky one, wherein how will you justify all of that, etc. Do you really have PMF? And I think PMF also is a continuum, wherein you get it, then you lose it also, and then you have to regain it. So because
I think
market,
it's cyclic, it's very dynamic when it's tech consumer, right? I think in the brand business, it's the opposite. It's a network effect business. So the more you do the right things, eventually the brand actually, because the brand is the value, right? So eventually the brand gives you that repeat and margins and premium and all of that. So it's an anti-tech playbook kind of, you don't need to really innovate much beyond a certain point once, your consumers are set, right? And that's why you'll not see legacy brands really innovating, because they have no reason to innovate, right? And that's where maybe new brands come in. D2C becomes like a window for new brands to come in. So I think it's interesting, but yeah, I think fundamentally maybe 80% will not survive, but 20% will create large outcomes. And I think I think that is a very optimistic view, and I would say that this is just a start. I think India will create global brands, and that should be our mission also, right? So we should be able to create global brands from India, because India has always been a great base for sourcing, manufacturing. I think marketing has always been our weakness, right, at a global platform level. And D2C is bringing so much of innovation in terms of communication, content, visualization, the whole thing, right? So that is what I think we are really doing right with D2C versus a traditional brand approach. So I think that is a scalable playbook globally, and we are already seeing some signs like Vadam or some of these brands really being able to compete with global brands. So I think it's a great thing, if maybe Indian brands have not done a great job at that, so I think I would want D2C brands to really go and break that glass ceiling and show that yes, we can create global brands and we can compete with global brands. There's no reason why we cannot achieve it.
Correct. And in fact, we internally had a thesis that at GoKwik that there are going to be at least 25 brands which are going to become now or size of Mamaearth now. So,
right.
And we have now very high conviction that there are certain brands which are on that path. They will see that inflection brand suddenly grow. So totally with you. I think this is secular in nature. While we might have short-term aberrations that okay, market has opened up, consumer is going offline, etc. But we continue to see month on month, at least everyone is growing.
Yeah, I think if the fundamentals are strong, it doesn't matter, from a rear view perspective,
Yeah.
Like you said, 5-10 year journey. So it will not be a 1-2 year wonder kid, right? You just see a boat suddenly becoming big and everyone thinks that, that is the only, but it's not necessary. I mean, everyone will have a different trajectory, and brands by default.
That they started in 2014.
Exactly. So all these brands.
Nobody was looking at that space.
Actually, 2-3 years for a brand just goes into the product market fit. Just the consumer items, the product iteration.
The beauty about brands as a business is that creating a brand, you can't short circuit it.
Right. It's
anti-time.
Productive.
Yeah. So you can't. That's the beauty, that even if you have money, if you have an association going, still you can't break it.
Right.
So that's why, which also brings me to a very, another topic which all of D2C brands also go through, and you are in a special position to answer that question because you have run a performance marketing business and now you run a brand business. How do you look at these two pillars, performance versus brand? How should brands look at it? And can you do a cut saying that, okay, early stage brand, this is how you look at it, and then post PMF, this is how you look at it? Would love to know your views, and then I'll chime in.
See, because I've been on the performance side, I can clearly, tell you that performance always follows brand, right? So although we all want the opposite, we all want performance to, lead the brand, but that doesn't happen. Performance is an output metric. It's not an input metric, right? Brand is an input metric, right? So you have to build that brand, and brand is defined by so many things: customer experience, product, pricing, distribution. There's so many things which will build a brand. I think performance is one of the pillars within the brand, I would say, right? I don't see it as performance versus brand. I would say, so brand would be, something which would get you top of the funnel, and performance would be something which will convert that audience, right? But to even convert that audience, your brand has to be strong, right? The product market fit has to be strong. The pricing has to be right. The product has to be innovative. You have to have retention of the consumer, which means that, again, the product has to be good for the repeats to happen. So I think in my mind, it is all brand. And this business is, in the long run, if you look at it, what is the moat of the
Yeah.
playbook? It is the brand only, right? Because everything else can be copied. See,
Yeah.
none of us are really innovating, in a sense that, hey, this is a unique product which no one else has, right? So there will be multiple players doing the same thing, and we all outsourcing, our manufacturing, and we are sourcing from different places. So then storytelling, brand building, consumer experience, and the consumer insight around it is what is going to make you win in the long run. Performance is like adding fuel to the fire, right? So once you have that moat strong, yes, performance can really help you scale, right?
Correct.
But I would say initially it is brand and then performance, not reverse, right? Because
But how do you rationalize this? So let's say if I am a starting up new age brand and have launched, let's say, a couple of products, and how should one think? How should I think about it? That should I, let's say, run CPA campaigns on Facebook, or should I do top of the funnel, expect that whosoever comes, I will remarket to them? How should this is one of those conundrum situations, right? Wherein you are thinking that मैं सेल ले आता हूँ पहले brand पे लगा दूंगा तो पता नहीं क्या होगा because I don't know my audience.
right.
How do I have to see?
Somewhere, obviously, performance marketing is very, very important to get you a certain, tipping point, right? Because see, even if the brand is good and the product is good, if don't have distribution, so performance is like distribution, right? So earlier distribution used to happen offline, now you have on Facebook, right? So distribution is required, but what I'm trying to say is that distribution-led approach will not win in the long run, because eventually distribution is commoditized, and that is what is happening in D2C today, right? Why you see suddenly such headwinds is because people were just so dependent on distribution, right? कि यार Facebook पे ad चलाओ और numbers आ जाते, right? But the Facebook पे ad 100 लोग चला रहे हैं same चीज के लिए, तो then consumer is getting split in 100, right? Then the brand will matter, right? So I'm saying performance is required, definitely. So initially, let's say you need to get a pool of, let's say, X number of customers to try the brand. And then if the brand is strong, then there'll be a repeat, there'll be a referral, there'll be, and that is how you will measure the brand metric, right? Your share of voice, your repeats, your recall, all of that, right? So eventually then you have to invest in top of the funnel also and bottom of the funnel also, right? And then obviously, you need to make sure that your repeats and retention are strong. And that is customer experience, right? So see, with the whole brand playbook, there are like 4 pillars. So brand, performance, product, and then the customer experience. So all these 4 have to be right together. You can't do it one by one. You can't say कि अच्छा मैं अभी पहले brand बनाता हूँ, फिर मैं performance करूँगा, फिर मैं customer experience ठीक करूँगा. So because the consumer today is not loyal. I mean, it's very competitive. So consumer will not give you a second chance, right? So if you today try Almo and you don't have a great experience, even if I'm very efficient on Facebook marketing, next time you're not going to repeat. And every time, I can't acquire a new consumer like you, right? Because there's a small finite pool of consumers, right? I think one thing with Indian internet is like what we have seen is even a Zomato or even the large tech consumer companies, the actual transacting consumer base is very small, right? So it's not like the TAM is very large. So, and we are all targeting the premium segment or the niche, within the mass market, right? So we're not targeting mass market, right? So by default, D2C is generally targeting a premium niche, right?
Yeah.
Then you have an X number of consumers. So distribution can help you acquire initial consumers, but eventually your product and your brand has to work for them to repeat, right? Yeah. And that's where I think a lot of D2C brands are struggling also, because you've not thought through, the product market fit, or you've not really tested it out, and you've just gone all out on performance, right? And your ROI starts tanking because you're not getting repeats, or the consumer is not like really getting good, strong positive vibes from the brand, and it becomes very discounting driven also, right? So you've seen Mama and everyone do buy one get one, right? We all are guilty of it. I think that's the shortcut to acquire a consumer, but a consumer who's acquired by that doesn't tend to repeat. He or she tends to repeat also at that discount, right? So I think that is a typical trap which performance marketing drives you to do, right? Because everything is a number, right? But brand is not a number. Brand is emotion. Brand is a softer feeling, right? So I think I would say it is brand and then performance. Performance would help you accelerate the brand and get you some distribution. But yes, I think core has to be brand.
Correct.
So maybe if you are just launching any of 3-4 products, maybe the first 100-200 customers should come out of your network, right? And once you have a strong feeling that yes, this customer is the right customer for me and this product has enough value for the customer, then you invest in performance marketing to get, let's say, 10x or 100x more customers, right? And then it becomes a loop, where you keep acquiring customers and you keep investing in top of the funnel and you keep converting them, right? So I think that would be a good playbook. But again, it requires patience. The problem is that you have 2 years. It's all been 0 to 100 crore. Every brand is doing 100 crore in their first year. तो अब वो FOMO create हो जाता है कि यार वो तो 100 crore कर रहा है, right? So I think it's been a race to the bottom, right? And that's why I say that it's a mirror to the e-commerce playbook, because this is exactly what happened in e-commerce also, right? Every Tom, Dick, and Harry started an e-commerce marketplace and sourced brands and started selling and started running ads. So back then it was Google, today it is Facebook, right? So just the medium keeps changing, and 80%, 90% of them did not survive because there was no value proposition, right? So same thing is happening with D2C.
I think it's a very interesting point which you made, that how do you, which I think we were discussing earlier also about market fit, and how do you use value lever and analyze as a founder that, okay, do I have a value prop which is working for the consumer and they are willing to pay? And if you press the growth lever before value, then it's dangerous, because then you have a leaky bucket, which of course you want to solve over time.
Right.
But then in a market like India, as you said, that you're going to run out of people, the brand, and especially when you're creating a brand, this starts to go outside in the market, that okay, XYZ, and then the NPS starts to go down. So it's a tricky one. And I think that's where you made a very, very valid point, that while the job of media is to publish only people who have touched 100 crores, unicorns, etc., because that's how media works. But for us, as founders, it's important to, because this rat race never ends, right? Today you might be comparing it with 100 crores, tomorrow you will be comparing with
because of the exuberance of fund, easy availability of capital in the last 2 years, I think as founders we all tend to fall into the bad habit trap, right? So I was just listening to Naveen in Mobi's podcast, and he was talking about it. Your bad habit cannot make you win. You might buy growth by throwing money, but eventually that growth is not going to sustain.
Yeah.
So I think in brand business that is even more true, right? Because brand cannot be reversed engineered, and once the brand is in a certain direction, then it's very difficult to turn it back. That perception has already been formed, right? And brand is actually just a perception in the consumer's mind, right?
Yeah, it's a clear one-way door.
Yeah, it is a one-way street, right? So even more than tech businesses, I would say in the brand business, doing the right thing and not getting into the bad habit is very, very important. But because of the last 2 years of exuberance and the pressure which comes with it, and everyone is like doing 100 crore, so it's like very easy, discount door, sales layout, so that's what everyone does, right? And I think, but you'll see few brands which will come out of that, which will actually focus on consumer and the consumer experience, and that's where I think enablers also are very important, because today if a consumer is coming to Amazon and versus coming to Almo, how do you really give him experience where actually, okay, you can't match Amazon experience, but it has to be a standardized experience, and that's where Shopify and GoKwik and all the enablers in the ecosystem are really coming together, right? Because otherwise it was not possible for a single brand to be able to offer that kind of experience. So consumer would always go to a Book My Show or Amazon, not to a PVR cinema, right? So it's
I think who came from that world, who understood numbers really well. And then I realized, the world is not driven by numbers. Human is an irrational human being. They always take decisions and then justify it by doing something. So and it's been very, very fascinating learning for me as well, that how do you ensure that brands and what you were saying, that ek bari perception ban gaya. For example, what WhatsApp is facing today, that consumers know them for a chat experience.
Right.
Now that mindset is already set. Now moving that to pay is going to be very hard, in spite of a very neat community.
Then naturally you don't, your reflex action doesn't come.
Because you open for that. Similar for Google Pay. If Google Pay wants to, it's a payment app. If they want to see that, okay, can users chat here? It's very difficult. They can only scratch the surface, do 5% market share. That's all.
No, true. I think in the consumer's mind, they like to segment,
Correct.
Even people, right? Acha, Chirag aisa hai, wo aisa hai, right? So, if Chirag suddenly change ho jayega, then I'm like, yeah, this is not Chirag, right? So, it's human psychology, right? So, and brand, basically, like I said, is a perception, right? So, if you have segmented yourself and created a perception for something, then you need to stick to it, and it requires patience for you to keep building on that perception, right? And but because of this whole race to the bottom and building like crores and numbers and all of that, so I think everyone is doing everything. तो कोई value proposition बचता ही नहीं है, and then eventually like a Bombay shaving company eventually doing women's hygiene, for example, right? I mean, that would be detrimental to the brand, the core brand, right? So then obviously then you have house of brand and people creating more brands, and but again, I think globally also from a house of brand perspective, you need to have a strong anchor brand to be able to create a house of brand. So अगर your one baby is like 2-year-old and you're creating another baby, तो मतलब दोनों ही weak होंगे, right? So that is because that we have gone through that cycle, and this is natural. This is a good thing. It's a very healthy thing. People will learn from it, and stronger players will emerge. And eventually, I think the playbook will also get clearer. Right now, I think we are all experimenting, right?
Yeah.
And like you said, there's no global playbook. I think US made D2C is very, very pure D2C. India made D2C has been marketplace D2C, right?
Yeah.
So the actual D2C in India has not happened till now. It is actually now happening, right? Maybe next 5-10 years, we'll see actual D2C brands emerge, right?
I think our users should definitely listen to this, because he's the guy who in 2018 said that this is going to happen. Now he's again saying that in 5 years, this is the mainstream or US type D2C where users are going to shop on website. He's making
I think it's happening now. You already see like 20-30% of revenue coming from, and you are sitting on the transaction funnel, so you know it, despite Amazon being there, right? Because see, one thing is with Amazon, consumer today is looking for an experience. He's looking for discovery, which on Amazon is not possible, right? And that's why you see a wave of consumers not going to Amazon, coming to the brand website, because they want that experience, right? And they are okay to like go through a little wait maybe one more day for the delivery, but then there is a ShipRocket, there is a GoKwik, there's all of these ecosystem enablers who are actually making it as smooth as Amazon, right?
Yeah.
So I think consumers are very, very evolved. They are willing to evolve, they are willing to experiment. Maybe initially earlier they did not have the option only, no? There was no offering only, then how would they have done it, right? So
totally.
If I want PVR Gold, if I want PVR director's cut, I will go to PVR directly. I don't need a book my show in between, right? So I think that is one of the things which I hope will happen, because when we say D2C, it has to be a direct consumer channel.
Correct.
That's where all the magic is, right? Selling on Amazon, it's a great business. Maybe it's a great channel for discovery and acquiring consumers. But eventually, even if 30-40% of your business is D2C, that gives you so much of insights and so much of you can actually pick up the phone and talk to consumers and ask them, like, so we have two ranges. So we have a cotton range and we have a micromodal range, right? So I can actually map how many people bought cotton and then upgraded to micromodal, right? Or how many people actually entered the funnel with micromodal directly and did not buy cotton at all. And then I can figure out, hey, is cotton something which is more preferred than micromodal, right? And then I can reverse engineer my supply chain, right? Which obviously in an offline world is not possible because the feedback loops were so long, right? So I think that is what D2C has really enabled. And that's why brands can be nimble and they can come up with innovations. You can track the consumer behavior so closely. Like you can even see what is their bounce rate, add to cart, checkout rate at a product level, at a color variant level, right? Which was not possible. I mean, that data is like something which maybe only an Amazon would have otherwise, right? Sample size, I think that's a significant data for you to be able to have a trend out of.
Absolutely. I think what we would like to at least as enablers say here is that a lot of people tell us that a lot of people have data, etc. But I think the key is that like in our kitchens, a lot of people have ingredients, but it's to the chef that can they create a Michelin star dish.
True.
It's the same, right? People might have data, but how do you use that data? Is that data even usable? Have you kept it in the refrigerator so that it doesn't get stale, etc.
True.
It's a tricky one, and these fields have become very niche. That there are a handful of people globally who understand deeply, and everyone is vying for them. Typically, they would work for these FANG companies.
Right.
So at least the way I visualize, because you mentioned e-commerce enablement, is that we are trying to convert all fixed costs for D2C as a marginal cost, so that you do pay per use, etc. We incur everything as fixed. So
makes sense. Yeah, absolutely.
Correct. And I think you also mentioned one more point, that if you are an early stage brand, you should look at first 100-200 customers from your side, and then you go deeper with them. Especially in a market like India, where at least my view is that early adopters are low in numbers. How does one do it, in that situation? And this is a function of that if you have more discretionary income, then you are willing to try out. We have seen in US, for example, New York, we all know that has so many bars. Everyone wants to try out. Weekends are all about trying out. Monday, everyone starts their day about, okay, what have you done really different on the week over the weekend? In India, that's not the conversation starter.
True.
So, that population itself is limited. Of course, we are reaching that inflection point where it's growing really fast.
Yeah, but I think India is also changing. Yeah, ऐसा नहीं है. I think that India is actually becoming a hybrid kind of a ecosystem, and I think there's enough early adopters today. I think, like I said, I think there's a dearth of supply. I think the pent up demand is like so high. Like when we started Almo, we initially thought of Almo as an urban brand, and we said we'll target 25 to 40 urban males and office goer and 5-10 lakh rupees CTC. But I'm surprised. I think the kind of reception we have from tier 2, tier 3 towns and remote towns, and I think it's just that people never they have discretionary income, but they never had that option.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so I think maybe they can't really travel abroad, right? And not everyone is is an international business traveler, but there's a lot of pent up demand, and I think Indian consumers are really there. I mean, it's more about who's going to like service them, right? But obviously, it's not like a very large TAM. It's a smaller subset. Obviously, you're right. In matured markets, that's more mainstream, right? But I think there's enough, from a DTM perspective, there's enough proof of concept which you can establish. And then obviously your distribution channels, your performance marketing, omni-channel, whatever is your distribution strategy, you will obviously have to, scale that. But it's not that difficult, like if I compare it to 10 years back, right?
Yeah,
That's when Indian consumers were not available. I mean, you have to literally go and tell people that, hey, shop online and, there's a new product or a new brand, and people are very skeptical about it. Today's generation is very, very open to change. In fact, there is an anti wave, where people don't want, like I said, they don't want to go to Amazon. They are on Instagram. They want to they're like, oh, this brand is not cool enough, right?
Yeah.
So, this whole sustainability, sustainability is a very soft, feature, right? It's not a hard feature. So Indians actually buying products because it is sustainable. Like you mentioned, Neiman's, right? So I'm wearing a Neiman shoe in my office. I see so many people, and I'm like asking a 23-year-old guy, he's earning maybe 20,000. He's wearing a 5,000 rupees shoe. I'm like, bhai, tu kaise afford kar sakta hai? He's like, sir, cool hai, right? So that cool hai is something which was not there 10 years back in India, right? So I think there is an audience, definitely. Whether it is scalable, maybe not. Maybe that time will tell. India has a large population for sure, right? So, top of the funnel तो बड़ा है, तो उसमें से अगर छोटा percentage भी निकलेगा, तो it is still a large enough market.
Absolutely right. I think we should not get swayed by that. We have 1.4 billion people and we need to serve one of them, right?
Yeah.
That's government job. I think we need to find who resonates with brands or products and then go about. In fact, I remember this movie Lal Singh Chadda, which has this, I don't know if you have seen.
Yeah.
So that's probably, I don't know, is that in real life also, but that's the origination of Rupa in some sense.
I think that was a little paid kind of a placement.
I generally became curious that how did Almo start, the name of the brand, and then where is it going? So right. From to where is it going?
So like I said, like in my previous avatar, when I was doing e-commerce, I was running a men's fashion marketplace called Fetties, right? And we used to basically be in the business of getting luxury global brands to liquidate their inventory through a flash sales model, right? And so basically I was exposed to a lot of these global brands, and within men's fashion, innerwear was one of the segments. And we actually started sourcing from global brands. And then I actually realized that, hey, there's such a cool assortment available. And I used to go to Shoppers Stop every time and see just a Jockey or a CK, right? And I used to actually sit on data of consumers shopping all these global brands. And people, basically it was showing that there is a need, there is a demand, right? But there's no supply. So it's a typical D2C, opportunity where there is a gap which traditional brands are not servicing, right? So that's how, although Fetties did not work out and eventually, shut down, but that idea stayed with me, right? And e-commerce and digital was always my domain. And then I found Muskan, who comes with the apparel background. Her family has been in the apparel manufacturing business. They're one of the oldest, like 120-year-old company in the apparel space. So her family basically, has been running, the apparel business for the last 120 years, right? And she was passing out of college and she wanted to do something. And I said, "Dekho, mere ko e-commerce aata hai, tumko kapda aata hai, so let's do something together where we can build something new. There is this gap." And so that's how it started. And then the name actually came because we were looking for so from day one, we wanted to build an international brand, right? So we said that, hey, there is a gap in the market, but this can be a global brand, eventually. So we don't want to position it as an Indian brand or as a made in India brand. We want to position it as a global brand. Also because we are targeting a premium segment, so we maybe want to position it in a way where Indian consumer looks at it as an international brand. So we were looking for a European brand name, because jockey is American basically, right? So we said, American brands are great at branding, but Europe is where the fashion and the, Europe is known as the fashion, hub, right? So we wanted an Italian name. And so then Almo basically means soul in Spanish, right? So
Oh,
yeah, so it went well with the, the category. And we said, that's where our tagline is, like your inner confidence, right? So it just came across, and, also the trademark was available. That was like one good learning from Muskan's family, because they've been in the brand business. So it was very clear that trademark hona chahiye brand ka, right? So we had initially 2-3 other names, but trademark was not available or some other issue was there. So Almo came across and we found the brand, and yeah, so I think that's been the whole thesis behind the brand. And although after that, like after Corona, there has been a made in India kind of a wave, right? And we launched within Corona, right? When I think COVID started from Italy, right? So at that, when we launched, Italy was like the hotbed of COVID, and we were an Italian brand, and we could not call ourselves Italian because people would think in India, the COVID ke saath aayega. So we had to like subdue it, and So even now, if you look at our brand, it's not like very out of the face. We are not calling it an Italian brand. We are saying it's Italian inspired ethos and design and all of that. But yeah, we have positioned it as a global brand. So that's why I say that eventually, India is a good base market for us to build from. And innerwear is a category which is a very basic, essential need, right? So every man globally will have the same need. Maybe the sizing and all of that will change, but it's a very basic, necessity for every man. So we believe that we can build a global brand from the Indian manufacturing base we have, because India is the apparel hub, and in cotton and in certain raw materials, we have like a huge advantage of domestic production and capability. So I think most of the production globally also happens either in Bangladesh, China, or India, right? So I mean, there are international brands which are coming to India, sourcing from India, and selling in India, right? And charging a premium, right? So why not build from India and sell to the world? That was the whole idea.
Yeah.
So that's how it came about.
Interesting. And where is it headed? Where are you taking this? I know that you're a big fan of D2C. You understand the space really well, but where are you seeing this? I'm not asking this as an investor that, okay, what is your vision, etc. But where is this headed? Is this going to be positioned as a lifestyle brand? How are you visualizing this?
So I think when we started, the idea was to build a global lifestyle brand. But frankly, to be very honest, those 3-2.5 saal ho gaya, and I think we are still in the early stage, right? So I think it's a slow poison. So I think we are still in phase 1 of the brand. So abhi to global and all that is not in the viewpoint. We are still focused on India market, and I think this is a huge upside because we see the category growing like really fast after COVID. So that way we had the right timing. And I think the next 18 months for us is just about scaling our distribution and hitting like that 100 crore mark, which is like the magic mark after which you go offline and all of that. Eventually, yes, I think like you mentioned, Middle East and Southeast Asia, those would be ancillary markets for us. And through Amazon Global, we are looking at Amazon US as well as UK. But I think it's too early for us right now. I think India is a big enough market, and we are still very early in the product life cycle also. So we've done everywhere. We just launched our loungewear. We are launching our winter wear this season. Next year, we plan to get into the athleisure. So the vision for the brand is to be a lifestyle brand, to provide a one-stop solution for the evolved man, right? For us day-to-day essential needs, right? So even including like grooming, right? So we might even get into grooming down the line, right? Because we are not looking at it as a innerwear brand only. We are looking at it as more of a platform for your day-to-day essentials for the evolved man, right? So let's see. But right now, I think in that cohort of apparels and innerwear itself, there's a lot to be done. And I think the product is also evolving, right? So we had micromodal, and now we are doing a cotton blend of micromodal. So we're trying to figure out how to make the product more, comfortable, last longer. So there's a lot of innovation which is required on the product also. And so I think it's a long journey. So I would not say that, hey, we want to go global or we want to, do all that. But I think next 18 months, we're just focused on scaling. We have built a nucleus in the last 2.5 years, right? Now we at least know what is working for us and scale that up and have more, like, from a marketplace perspective. So we are very D2C heavy. So we are like 60-70% D2C. So that's a low hanging fruit that, hey, can we scale on Amazon, Myntra, Flipkart, all these channels, which we are not focused on maybe. And this season, actually, this Diwali season, our whole focus has been on marketplaces, right? So it's the reverse. Most of the brands start with marketplaces and later do D2C. For us, we actually started with D2C as the default, and now we are scaling marketplaces, and maybe then eventually go offline also, because one fact is very clear that beyond, let's say, a certain scale,
You have to.
offline only cannot like scale, right? So consumer needs the brand to be in their catchment area, and that visual presence and touch and feel is very important. And from a it actually feeds back into the brand, right? So let's say it in this way, where if I open a store in Bandra and I'm spending 5 lakh rupees on the rent, that logo of that store is giving me 5 lakh rupees worth of advertising, right?
Yeah.
So that way, I think it feeds into the brand. So maybe next year, later half of next year, we'll have to look at going offline, right? Maybe
Correct.
some kind of EBO or omni channel. So I think there's lots to be done in the next 2-3 years just in India. And eventually, yes, I think we would like to explore global markets and maybe start with Middle East and Southeast Asia, which are ancillary markets. But I think abhi to 18 month ka jo goal hai, it's like that's very focused.
I think you have full clarity in terms of how it is to be done, and totally agree that it doesn't mean, especially in our markets, that you constrain yourself to a channel. This is a good channel to start. In fact, now we are seeing what you are doing, that we are seeing that brands starting on D2C, because marketplaces have become crowded. As we were discussing, consumer
Right.
know, okay, this is what I'm shopping for. Generic queries have become branded queries.
Right.
So it's changing. So if you are creating a brand now, it is easier to do it on D2C and then go to marketplaces, versus let's say 5 years ago it was the opposite.
True. Marketplaces have become as competitive, and marketplaces, maybe it's mostly ad driven now, right? So again, your brand has to be there. You have to it's a very distribution led approach on marketplaces also, right? So it's not anymore free traffic. Amazon, Flipkart are also monetizing heavily. So I think it's very, very complicated, and I think D2C actually is emerging as a more profitable channel. So in our case, D2C PNL is profitable. Amazon is actually a little burn for us.
Oh wow.
Because again, we are investing in Amazon, we are trying to build our rankings, and organic contribution is low right now. But as we scale, obviously the organic will pick up. I think 3-4 years back, D2C was too expensive to build, right? And it's also because of enablers, right? Because it's like everything is plug and play, right? So you don't like Shopify is value for money, right? So you don't need to have a tech team and invest in servers and all of that anymore. So it just makes it so easy for go to market and giving a standardized experience.
Absolutely. I think one last question before we round this up. Because you come from fashion, you have seen the innerwear, or you run an innerwear business. Specifically in D2C, and I think this is, I have been curious about that. Fashion is a large segment in our country. Where all do you see gaps in the fashion space where people should look at deeply? At least I believe that in that there are various spaces which D2C hasn't gone deep. There are marketplaces which have emerged, but in D2C, innerwear is one which has done well, both for men as well as women. But other segments such as ethnic wear, we have seen large brands, Biba, etc., but they've not really, we've not seen new age brands come in. Do you see any gaps, which people should be looking at deeply?
Yeah, I think fast fashion has been a global, movement, right? So you have seen all these Chinese, companies really scale,
Shein,
right? Yeah, Shein and all of these, right? So, but that's not a trend which a lot of youngsters actually would relate to in the long run, because I think there's an anti wave of sustainability is a bigger thing now than fast fashion. But I think personalization could be a big wave in fashion, right? Because fashion is very individual. It's a very individual taste, and the more you standardize, the more it becomes less fashionable, right? Mm-hmm. So I think D2C, the pure D2C model can actually enable certain business models which are not possible offline, right? Like you have Nike in the US now having a make your own shoe, right? So you configure your shoe, right? So I think those kind of things will become more mainstream going forward. And as a brand, you have to offer that if you want the consumer to come to you directly and shop from you, right? Otherwise, Amazon is a great platform to standardize everything, right? So अगर यही जूता आपको लेना है तो आप Amazon पे जाके भी ले लोगे, but you come to a website because you can get monograms or personalization or customization or whatever you call it. So I think that is going to be big. And one more thing which I think will be big will be recycling, right? So because when you talk about fashion, I think there's a huge wave against, fashion is the most, non-sustainable, apparel and fashion is very, very unsustainable, because there's a lot of wastage and there's a lot of so I think that upcycling and recycling thing is like really going to pick off. Maybe India is too early for it, but in the US you already see that trend, right?
Yeah,
People are more than willing to like recycle and upcycle, because fashion has to be conscious, right? And that conscious and sustainable fashion is like the big theme in the future. So I think these trends will come in, and from a category perspective, I think that whole teen category, maybe there's not much action in the teen side. That 18 to 25-year-old, which maybe a Bewkoof is targeting, right?
yeah.
That's again more on the fast fashion territory, right?
Correct.
But I think that is a category where a lot of action can happen in India, because India is a 60%, audience which is below 25, right? So, and when you talk about e-commerce, the first experience for them will be that, right? So, so so I think that will be the entry for them to e-commerce, right? So they would not really come online to buy a luxury product. They would come online to buy something which is fast and cheap, and which would talk their language, and a lot of that is through Instagram as an audience, right? They would actually not come to Amazon at all, right?
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
that audience does not relate to Amazon, right? They're not buying it for a need, right?
You would have read news today that TikTok is planning to become a full stream e-commerce player.
So this whole influencer thing, I think they could be like large brands created via influencers for these younger audiences. So in fashion, I think it's very micro fashion, right? So it would be boutique more than large mass brands, right?
Yeah, that's an interesting way to look at it.
So I think that is and more personalized, more micro, and more for the social audience. So I think that is already happening in the US, and TikTok is actually launching e-commerce, and they're going big into this.
Massive. Indonesia, 20% of e-commerce is happening on TikTok.
Wow. Unfortunately, TikTok got banned in India. So
Yeah, and you and I both are watching that nobody in India has still taken the space. So kudos to the algorithm which they have built.
Yeah. Despite Josh and so many players coming in, and
nobody is able to crack it really well. In fact,
I
even
was
the likes of Meta also.
I was just seeing one stat. TikTok has spent crazy amount of money on marketing. So they've spent 30% of their revenues on marketing, right? So it's not organic. It's not something just algorithm driven. Obviously, they've pumped in a lot of money behind distribution. But yes, I think like we said, that organic flywheel of putting money and getting top of the funnel and then the product working, right? Both have to be in sync.
Yeah.
It does work for TikTok. But yeah, unfortunately, at some point, TikTok was actually becoming bigger than Facebook, from a performance perspective also, right? So it was actually beating Facebook ROS and all of that. And then suddenly it got banned, right? So I think other problem D2C brands का तो ये है कि TikTok ban हो गया, right? अगर TikTok होता तो we would have had another channel to like really acquire.
Yes, we badly need one channel.
Yeah, the bad habits would have continued much longer.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, I think TikTok, and I think even the whole fast fashion and that platform, like India has not like witnessed that till now because of Corona, and then the China issues happening and all. But I think there will be players locally who will come up and do that, because India has a great manufacturing base. So I think this whole trend after D2C I see will be factory to consumer. So that fast fashion model is basically that. It is factory to consumer, right? You don't even need a brand in between.
Yeah.
It's a platform where it connects you to the factory guy, right? And you get products which are like cheap and fast and value for money, right? So usme if you can build a brand on top of it, and you can build some kind of a trust layer, then it's a very large opportunity, which maybe no one has done it till now. But I think that could be one big segment, because the population below 25 is so big, and they can't really afford. Like Almo cannot be afforded by most of them, right? We are actually targeting that 25 to 40 audience. So most of the D2C brands are targeting that evolved audience, right? So that whole teen audience overall, I think, is very underpenetrated. Be it fashion, be it any other category, even cosmetics and other categories, right? So, but it's a tough audience to sell to, right? Because the AOVs are low, acquiring them is not that easy. They're very impatient. Loyalty to hai nahi, matlab loyalty to zero hai, right? Negative loyalty, right? So yeah, I think it's a big segment where we could see some large brands emerge.
Correct. Interesting. Okay, we'll wrap it here. Although
Right.
I would love to continue this, maybe we'll do a part 2 of this. You are full of wisdom on some of these topics.
I think we should do the reverse, yeah. You should share all your insights from GoKwik. Yeah, you're sitting on so many brands, journeys. What is converting? What is not converting? What is converting? What is not converting? What is how is the consumer behavior? Because it's a standardized checkout, right? So now today a Neiman versus Almo should ideally be the same, right? But it's a platform where it connects you to the data. The factory guy, right? And you get products which are like cheap and fast and value for money, right? So most of the D2C brands are targeting that evolved audience, right? but you might see a very different behavior on Eman and Almo depending on the segment and the product and all of that, right? So I think it's very interesting, and maybe you guys should come up with some kind of a benchmark, where you can actually tell the agency, hey, boss, your
Well,
conversion
on
is
some
lower.
of that aspect, the unfortunate part is because we got ourselves PCI DSS and all of that stuff. So all basic cuts also now are masked
Right.
as well.
But
And
obviously. No, I'm saying it could be a more of a relative data, right?
correct. So doing that, and I think some of at least product managers have access, and they are now doing some of these things. Very, very, what you're saying, comparing at the brand level and some of that stuff. And that's what we will get to and publish a industry type report. That okay, this is how it is faring out. Would love to do that.
Yeah. Next one will be the reverse.
Done, boss.
Great.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for taking out time.